You know, it's always special each and every meeting and each and every day of our meetings when we hold our observances. And obviously today is the celebration of the Asian Pacific Islander Caucus. And one of the reasons it's so important for us to celebrate Asian Pacific American History Month is because it's American history. As we know, one of the most frustrating challenges for U.S. citizens of Asian and Pacific Island ancestry is being acknowledged as Americans, even when families have lived here for generations. That's why we're so excited today to have two genuine American heroes. Heroes that remind us that we are better together than apart. Heroes who remind us how important it is to champion the human and civil rights for all Americans. Those of you here today can be proud of NEA that we have always championed the rights of API students and their families. Even during the World War II years, when it was unpopular to protest the shameful internment of Japanese American families, NEA published banner articles that asked the question, what makes an American? Years later, we supported reparations for the families who had lost their homes, jobs, and freedom. Today, we continue to speak out against injustices to Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, including the stereotyping and bullying of API students. We continue to work with API leaders and communities on immigration reform that honors family unity. As we welcome today's guest speakers and the lessons they bring, we are awed by their presence and what they will bring us. Lessons that help us advance our advocacy, not only for Asian Pacific Islander students, but for all students. And at this time, I'd like to turn the observance over to a true advocate for API and all students, Richard Lum, Chair of NEA's Asian Pacific Islander Caucus. Richard.
Thunder announces my arrival. That's not in my script. Thank you, Dennis, for your warm welcome for today's guest speakers. And thank you, NEA, for your long-standing support of the Asian American and Pacific Islander community. We have a special treat for you today. 2 guest speakers, both with riveting stories that spotlight the unique experiences of Japanese Americans in this country. Terry Shima and Mary Murakami, both teenage students when the attack on Pearl Harbor brought the United States into World War II, have made it their mission to teach the American public a valuable lesson about civil rights and citizenship. Terry Shima is the former executive director of the Japanese American Veterans Association and the current chair of its Outreach and Education Committee. He has given a lifetime of meritorious service to this country, including a stint in the famous 100 Battalion 442nd Regimental Combat Team and the U.S. Foreign Service. Terry has received numerous awards for his work from the United States and Japan, including the Presidential Citizens Medal and the Emperor's Order of the Rising Sun. Our second guest, Mary Murakami, was just 14 when she and her family were forcibly relocated to U.S. internment camps along with thousands of other Japanese Americans. Science classes at the camp laid the foundation for Mary's later work in public health. As a senior microbiologist for Los Angeles County and medical technologist at Stanford Palo Alto Hospital. According to Mary, one of the most important life lessons she and her siblings learned from their experience was to pursue education, no matter what the circumstance. I could go on for days about this dynamic duo, but let's give our guests a chance to speak for themselves. NEA, please give a rousing welcome to Terry Shima and Mary Murakami.
Mr. President, distinguished educators, we wish to thank Ms. Monica Tamarat and Mr. Richard Lum for making this event happen today. JAVA's primary mission is education, and we are honored today to be addressing the nation's leading educators. I will provide a brief background. Mrs. Murakami will discuss the internment, then I will return to discuss the 100th Battalion and those who served in the Pacific. When Japan attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, there was mass hysteria in America against all persons of Japanese ancestry. We were viewed as being disloyal, for being saboteurs and collaborators of Imperial Japan. Our draft classification was changed to 4C, enemy alien, unfit for military duty. We, loyal American citizens, were disowned by our government. The second major blow came on February 19, 1942, when President Roosevelt issued Executive Order 9066, which authorized the War Department to establish 2 military zones, the Pacific Coast and the territory of Hawaii, each governed by a military governor with total control, including internal security. I'll turn the discussion over to Mary.
This is the background for my story as a teenager living in San Francisco, Japanese town, just one of the 120,000 internees. To this day, there are internees who will not speak of those years of imprisonment, but I think our history must be told so that it will not be repeated nor tarnish our democracy again. December 7th, 1941, the FBI was going through and picking up various people who had businesses with Japan. Japanese school teachers, we used to go to Japanese school after American school, and Buddhist priests and even judo instructors. We realized how our lives were going to change that evening when we saw the US Army surrounding Japanese town. They were facing us with their guns drawn. The Executive Order 9066 on February 19, 1942 is remembered by the internees as a day of remembrance each year. That order said you could take what you carry and you had to report when you're notified. Notification, the longest notice you had was 7 days. In the meantime, the curfew started. They were first in miles and then they were in blocks. During this period of time, no one could go to work, nor could we go to school because the curfews restricted us. We had to sell whatever we owned, and we had to get our shots and be ready whenever the government wanted us. The most important means of communication with the government was our telephone poles. After Executive Order 9066, the curfew notices went in. They became very restrictive. And then finally, in May, our family received our notice to report to the Assembly Center. There were 16 assembly centers. They were either fairgrounds or racetracks. Our place was Tanfran Racetrack, which was in San Bruno, California. We became family 22416. I was letter E by birth order. We were one of the lucky families because we were not in the racetracks early. Otherwise, we would have been stuck in the horse stalls. The horse stalls were just whitewashed. They didn't even have the mattresses ready, so they gave you a canvas bag and you filled it with straw. By the time our family had arrived, they had temporary barracks in the inner track. Each family had one room and cots were brought in. You stayed there and there was no formal education. There was mess halls to eat at. You had to bring your own bedding, so we put that up. The government gave us some army blankets. We used the racetracks for exercise, and we waited until the 10 permanent camps were ready. The 10 permanent camps were ready in the fall of 1942. Topaz opened on September 11, 1942. And fortunately, my sister was one of the first contingency of internees to go there. So we knew when we arrived there, she would have things ready for us. We were loaded on old trains and guarded by the U.S. Army in each train. The shades were drawn as we went through any town. And when we arrived in Topaz, all we saw was the fine dust on the ground, the black tarred barracks surrounded by barbed wires, and guard towers at each corner, and guard towers in between the corners. Life started in 2 rooms for us. We were fortunate because of my sister, we were able to get 2 small rooms instead of 1 large room. So my brother and my parents were in 1 room, and the 3 girls were in the other. Each block had 12 barracks, a latrine for men and women, showers, and a mess hall. The showers and the latrines were very upsetting to girls, especially teenagers, because they made the toilets facing each other and no doors. The showers were the same way. Someone was generous enough to donate their sheet and put it on one of the showers for the teenagers. The only furniture given us was the army cot and a pot-belly stove. Construction was not finished in camp, so we stole the lumber that was being used because the white guards would leave during the night, and the guards that during the day, during the night were internees. They would tell us when new shipment of lumber came in. My main concern in camp was my education. I had missed the most of my 9th grade because of the curfews, and I entered high school in a converted barracks for classes. I spent all my high school years in Topaz. By the time I reached 12th grade, there was not enough academic courses to go around, so they told me to start high school over again. In 1943, that winter, University of California and a private university came into the camps, and they offered a place for us to restart the system for Japanese Americans again. And so I went to the school and told them they were wasting my time and give me my diploma. And I was one of the first ones to reopen Cal Berkeley. Thank you. In the fall of 1943, the government decided to question our loyalty. I assumed we were loyal because we went into the camps willingly, but the government sent out questionnaires. Question 27, are you willing to serve in the armed force? If you wanted your civil rights back first, that was considered a no answer. Question 28, do you forgo all allegiance to the Japanese emperor? This would have meant our parents would be without a country if they answered yes, and the fact that the law of the U.S. would not allow Japanese to become U.S. citizens. This was a very difficult time because if there was any no answers on that questionnaire, you were sent to other camps, and this is where the breakup of the families became very difficult. This was also the time the young volunteers decided to prove their loyalty by serving in the Army, and the 442 was formed. This was also the time the U.S. decided to start the drafting camp, and my brother left camp for the Army. This is the point where Terry will take over and tell you about the 442.
I will use the Japanese term, Nisei, which means children born of Japanese immigrant parents. Some 5,000 Nisei were already in the U.S. Army when war began. General DeWitt, military governor of the Pacific Coast, discharged them. Most of them went home, helped the families pack, and went to camp with them. Lieutenant General Delacy Emmons, military governor of the territory of Hawaii, decided that mass internment was not necessary, that the Japanese could be controlled under martial law. General Emmons left Washington, D.C. with orders to lock them up on the mainland or on the island of Molokai. General Emmons laid his career and his rank on the line and stonewalled Washington, including the President of the United States, for 2 years until the threat of land invasion by Japan was no longer possible. 1,432 Nisei were put into the 100th Infantry Battalion that was just organized, sent to Camp McCoy, Wisconsin for training, and they were subsequently deployed to Italy for combat. Nisei, individually and in groups, petitioned Washington to allow them to serve in combat to prove their loyalty. Washington listened. The War Department activated the 442nd Regimental Combat Team and issued a call for volunteers, viewing this as an opportunity to prove their loyalty. 2,500 volunteers from Hawaii were accepted, and 1,500 volunteers from the mainland, including many from internment camps. In addition to help win the war, Nisei volunteered to prove their loyalty, the only ethnic group that went into combat during World War II for that purpose. Following training, the 442nd was shipped to Italy. By then, the 100th Battalion had been in combat for 9 months, racked up an impressive record, took a large number of hits. The press labeled them the Purple Heart Battalion. 2 Nisei units merged, and the older brothers of the 100 mentored the younger brothers of the 442nd. In September 1944, the 442nd was deployed to the Vosges forest area in northeastern France, not too far from the German border. They liberated French towns and rescued a trapped Texas battalion in the Vosges forest. Following his capture, the German commander said that Hitler had ordered, "Kill them all, take no prisoners." The rescue was costly for the 442nd. One company that started with 180 men ended with 16 men standing. Another company, 8. What did the 442nd achieve? They followed the Army dictum: don't leave your buddy behind. They must be saved at all costs. They helped the 36th Division smash the German fortress in the Vosges, thereby giving the 7th Army a clear shot into the march into German homeland, which was not too far away. It put to lie historians' claim that since the days of the Holy Roman Empire, no invading force was able to defeat the force that controlled the Vosges, and it saved the US division commander the embarrassment from having to admit he lost the battalion. Some 16,000 Nisei served in the 442nd. An additional 4,000 over Nisei served in the Asia-Pacific region, fighting soldiers of their parents' homeland. They served as translators of captured enemy documents, as interrogators of prisoners of war, monitors of enemy communication. They entered caves to persuade the Japanese soldiers to surrender. They served in Burma with the Merrill's Marauders and the OSS, the first Americans to fight on the Asian continent since the days of the Boxer Rebellion. They served with a small contingent of Americans in Yan'an, China, living in the caves as guests of the Chinese communists. The first US government official contact with Mao Zedong and Zhou Enlai. They were in nearly every invasion force to pass to the commander tactical intelligence obtained real time from Japanese documents and prisoners. They served in every unit that needed Japanese linguists, including our allies, such as Australia and Great Britain. The war over, the guns now silent, America turned its attention to rebuilding the nation and the world. But General George C. Marshall advised Washington there was one more issue to resolve: the Japanese issue, the integration of Japanese in the American society. Washington turned to the 442nd, which was doing occupation duty in Italy. The 442nd was reviewed by President Harry Truman at the Ellipse. That morning rained very hard, and the military advisor said to the president to cancel his portion of the day's event. And the president is said to have replied, "Hell no. For what these boys have done, I can stand a little rain." The president's statement resonated across the land, supported by strong editorials. What he did was he affirmed Japanese-American loyalty. The editorials supported the president's statement, one of which won the Pulitzer. This was the first highest level attempt on the part of the government to defeat discrimination and prejudice and racism against ethnic Japanese. The Nisei and the Tuskegee Airmen settle the question of loyalty, and, establish a climate in Washington for post-World War II reforms, thereby leveling the playing field for minorities to compete for any job and rank. During World War II, the highest rank of a Japanese American was major, and there were only 4. And we were assigned almost exclusively to the infantry. Fast forward to the Vietnam War. Japanese Americans served in all branches of service, in the most sensitive war planning positions, in the cockpits of fighters and bombers as pilots and navigators, with ranks of major, lieutenant colonel, and colonel. Following the Vietnam War, over 100 Asia-Pacific Americans, including 43 Japanese Americans, were promoted to generals and admirals. Competing with the best of the best, Japanese Americans succeeded in reaching the highest plateau in the government, in the military, in the academia, business, and other disciplines. The Civil Liberties Act of 1988 noted that internment was not necessary, that it was caused by racial prejudice, war hysteria, and the failure of political leadership. And it afforded President Ronald Reagan the opportunity to express the nation's apology for the internment. A couple of years ago, NEA were awarded the Congressional Gold Medal. The highest honor our nation can bestow. And more recently, the United States senators selected from among them a Japanese American to serve as President pro tempore of the United States Senate, a position constitutionally that put Senator Dan Inoue third in line for the presidency. Only 70 years ago, this same Japanese American was classified 4C and disowned by his government. Ladies and gentlemen, the Japanese American story speaks of the greatness of America. We are proud of our citizenship of this great nation. God bless the USA. Thank you very much.